These shots took me 9 days to make. Not because it was complicated, but because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Let's see how we got there. A while ago, I decided to start making my first video game. I'd never made a game before, but well, you've got to start somewhere, right? I already had a little experience with pixel art, so I chose that for my art style and I decided to keep things as simple as possible. We made a small 2D platformer for mobile. Surprisingly, everything was going pretty well until we reached a point where the game needed a trailer. I looked at a bunch of similar games and looked over the store page to see how they made the trailer, what do they show in that short videos, and I realized gameplay alone wasn't enough for making a good trailer. I wanted people to get a feel for the world before they even start playing. So I decided to make a short cinematic. The only problem was I'd never made one before. I mean, for real. I'd use Blender for small projects, I watched some tutorials on YouTube and I just, know about some basic modeling, simple renders, simple shaders, but I never animated anything and I never make a scene like this which everything have to work together. You have to make the field, atmosphere, characters, animating. I had no experience on that kind of project. So this video is basically the story of me trying to figure all of that out. One thing I always enjoyed over the past few years is scrolling through Pinterest or ArtStation and looking at others people's work. And it's honestly kind of crazy what some artists are able to create, and I always wanted to have that capability, the skill to make something like this. And there was always a type of scene that was, my thing. I always enjoyed looking at those kind of pictures. A lone warrior standing against an enemy that's way bigger than them. You know, the kind of fight where at first glance you already knew who's supposed to lose. That image had been stuck in my head for a very long time, and since it actually fit the world of RiftLand pretty well, I decided to build a whole cinematic around that kind of idea. Since I already designed my character and boss and they existed as a pixel art, so I figured I'd stick with that style and use them for my cinematic. Drawing characters has never really been one of my strengths, so I decided to use a reference photo and draw my character over it. So I started looking for a reference pose, and when I found it, I just used that image on sprite and started to paint over my character, aka Neon, over that photo. After that, I animated the hair and the cape to make the character feel a little more alive, give it some spirit. And while I was working on it, I kept thinking that lighting and fog could make a huge difference in this scene. And that's That's when I had the idea of mixing the pixel art with a 3D environment. So I drew a few simple environment pieces like rocks and grass and tried to animate grass, because Harry is moving, Cape is moving, so there's a wind in my scene, so grass should move as well. And after that, I export everything and brought it into Blender. The first result, honestly, wasn't great. I tried placing the ground, setting up the camera, moving things around, but no matter what I do, it never looked anything like the image I had in my head. And at that point, I was really close to giving up. Normally, this would have ended up next to all the other unfinished projects I've started over the past years, but this time I decided to keep experimenting instead. I figured I had nothing to lose. So at that point, I decided to step back. Blender wasn't really the problem. I just didn't have a clear picture of what I wanted yet. I went back to pixel arts, I went back to Asphrite, I reworked Neon's animation, redesigned the environment, and started blocking out the whole scene in 2D first. And somewhere during that process, the picture in my head started becoming more clear. Uh, I wasn't just placing objects anymore. I finally had a direction. I found that way that I was looking for. And once I went back to Blender, everything started moving much faster. I blocked out the scene again, modeled a few floating platforms for the background, and started experimenting with different ideas. I even tried making some glowing object that was supposed to light up the whole scene. But after fighting with it for a while, I realized it wasn't worth it. I'm not ready for that kind of modeling, and so I just I just let it go and I scrapped the idea and move on. And that kind of decisions making turned out to be a pretty common pattern during this project. If something wasn't working, I just stopped forcing it, and instead I looked for another solution. Little by little, the scene finally started feeling like the one I imagined. I added more details using a free environment asset pack, which I'll leave the link in the description if you want to check it out. And then I moved on to one of the things I was looking forward to the most, the fog. I wanted the boss to stay hidden behind it at first and then slowly reveal itself as the fog drifted away. It sounded really cool in my head, but in practice, not so much. I tried faking the fog with a shader on a plane and simply animating it across the scene. The result looked really fake. You could clearly see the edge of the plane moving across the thing and it looked terrible. After a bit more research, I came across Blender's volumetrics. So I gave them a try, and honestly, they were exactly what I was looking for. That atmosphere changed completely. It finally started looking like the scene I'd been imagining from the beginning, and um, at that point, something else became obvious. The lighting was doing most of the heavy lifting. So instead of using just one color, I decided to split the scene into two colors. One side warm and the other side cold. I wanted the contrast to make the hero and the boss feel even more separated, and so I placed a warm light behind the boss, behind his head, and it actually gave me the result that I was looking for. When I tried to model a core, which I failed, I was looking for this kind of result, and yeah, here it is. And after all the failed attempts, this was finally starting to feel right. I'm not saying it turned out perfect. Honestly, I don't think it is. But I also didn't expect I'd be able to make something that looked like this. The atmosphere was finally there. The fog made the lighting even more better. And just like that, I felt everything started coming together. Right before finishing, I made one last big decision. I realized the 2D rocks and ground just weren't working anymore, so I deleted all of them and I kept only the pixel art characters, my main character and the boss, and let everything else become fully 3D. Then I added a simple shader to the rocks to pick up my my cold color to show that the ground, the world are on our side. And it was a small change, but it helped tie the whole scene together. And just like that, I knew I finally had the trailer I'd been trying to make. Looking back, this trailer definitely isn't perfect. There are still a lot of things I'd change if I made it again, but honestly, that's not what I'll remember about this project. What I'll remember is finally deciding to make something which I had no idea how to make, and somehow, after a lot of fails, after a lot of errors, it actually came together. The whole trailer took me about a week to make. It ended up taking a little longer than I expected, but I'm really happy I stuck with it. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you have any questions, ideas, or suggestions, I genuinely love to hear them in the comments. And by the way, RiftLand is still far from finished. There's still a lot to build, a lot to learn, and probably a lot more mistakes to make. So, if you like to follow the journey, I'll see you in the next one.